Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. I'm trying to start earlier with the card pool, so let's just hop in immediately on this. We don't have even a full set of 10 for the legacy card packs, but weirdly we still are getting new cards, which, yeah, if anything, I guess that just really highlights that there's a ton of these legacy cards, but as the numbers increase as far as count of different cards, their value just decreases more and more in my mind. I mean, they're basically useless cards to start with, and I know that, but even getting one extra piece of art, just exclusively saying, hey, now I could potentially look at the art at least in this fashion. What really sucks is obviously 25-year-old card game wasn't thinking that the art in the square here would ever need to be in a separate file, and so they've probably got this art, but it may very well be in physical file folders and not in any kind of computer system, even at Konami's filing system. Whereas it would be very nice to just be able to double click this and see the image in a full screen. Even if you're playing on a cell phone, being able to see it in full screen would be helpful. If we just briefly scroll down here, it does look like there's still quite a few. And one of the things is you just never really know if there's a pity system per se, or how the algorithm really works as far as whether it determines to give you a new card or a fourth copy of Jinzo, which that can be an issue too. Although, since you're getting these cards, and I don't think you can like get rid of these cards as extras, there should be an algorithm to stop you from getting fourth copies, but clearly that didn't happen. As far as the notifications, I guess I should also say today is August 4th, Friday. They've got the World Championship Series Finals event page launched, which I assume I click on this and it's probably not this page. It's probably not this page. And it's probably not this page. Yet that's what it linked to. I was thinking it was going to take me to an actual website there, but apparently it didn't. Sniper Rangers on the chat. Let's see. Saying, Rydo, my boy, I think is what it says. He's repeating letters for effect, so I imagine that's what it's getting clipped off on the chat. He says, I missed you. Well, I've been here fairly consistently, so what happened would be the question there. If you've missed me, did you not get notifications because the bell isn't clicked? Is the bell clicked and you still didn't get notifications? Did I, with my YouTube shorts or something, irritate the algorithm or irritate you? Or have you just been busy in school or something? Like, a real personal explanation, even if it's just I've been busy or I just haven't been interested, this would be very helpful as far as just what to do to correct that. Because that is definitely a big issue, and I don't want to get into a long rant about the mostly downs of being a YouTube content creator, but particularly in this summer, and generally in summers in general, summers in North America, United States, I see big drop-offs in views, big drop-offs of uh, of watch time and things like that. Although I have been kind of steadily growing in subscribers, but very slowly still. YouTube Shorts, I think, have increased the number of views, but they are views on Shorts, so that's not the most satisfactory outcome possible, because I'd rather people watch my pre-recorded footage. And inherently, ever since I started my channel over 10 years ago, like, I wanted people to watch my pre-recorded footage and my criticism and while I'm playing video games. That is very long content that if I could afford an editor, maybe I would probably hire to edit down into something a lot shorter. But that's where I'm mostly being me and actually talking about video games, which, at least when I started my channel, was the main passion, was to talk about video games. It's only because YouTube pushed me to live stream that I started to live stream. It's only because the YouTube algorithm for a few years there was promoting live streams better and getting more views that I stayed with live streaming. And the same now is the case with YouTube Shorts, in that it's only because YouTube's algorithm is pushing me to make YouTube Shorts that I'm making YouTube Shorts, and because YouTube is pushing us to make YouTube Shorts, which they're not even really doing now. Now they're trying to push people to get people to sign up through memberships and steal market share away from the idea of Patreon. Sniper Ranger has been texting here. He says he was busy. That's fine with work. I'm here now, though. He says he's at work for most of the week, and by the time I stream, I'm preparing for work. I can't blame YouTube completely. My insomnia, it causes a massive amount of inconsistency when I start to stream, and particularly in the summer months, I want to stream later in the evening and sleep during the hot mornings and afternoons. Whereas, like, I don't know what time slot would really be the best. Like, it seems to me somewhere around 8 or 9 Eastern time in the morning is probably the right time to stream. I'm just not awake at that time most of the time, or I'm just not consistent at that time most of the time. But yeah, and speaking of that, there is also a small possibility I will just swap everything up. Anyways, I've been consistently streaming on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I might, at any point, switch to Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, which who knows if Saturday would really work. Sniper Ranger asked, better than Twitch? Twitch in general, like, as a YouTuber, I'm not going to Twitch every week, and I'm not comparing its features and its possibilities every week. In fact, I haven't looked really at Twitch either as a viewer or as a content creator probably in years. But I do hear things about Twitch, and in general, I'm not hearing amazingly great things about Twitch as far as actually being a video game streamer and a video game critic. I hear what seems to be some really bad management at Twitch, which seems to have always been the case. I do like the idea that Twitch has more of a capability that you could relabel a live stream and not lose your audience. That is a major flaw on YouTube. Like, I would like to call the first hour of these live streams a pre-show, and then I would like to be able to stop the pre-show at a very specific spot and then start the real show after I've warmed up and relabel it from pre-show to a different title, and it's just not that easy on YouTube to do that. But then Twitch fails miserably in a lot of other ways that have to be admitted. There's basically no interest, as far as I can tell, to watch old live streams or pre-recorded footage. There's no real playlists or suggestion algorithm on Twitch for old content, which inherently creates a scenario where Twitch streamers have to constantly stream if they want to constantly be monetized and make money. And the requirements as far as the amount of hours is just insane. Not something I could ever do. Whereas theoretically, I have 12,000 channels on my 12,000 videos on my YouTube channel. It's a lot. Theoretically, if I get monetized, then I have 12,000 videos that are still going to get little bits of ad revenue over and over again. Whereas if I made 12,000 videos on 12,000 live streams on Twitch, you're not going to get any views or ad revenue on any of that. And so if you get sick, if you get old, things like that, those are, you're just not getting that social support there. Twitch would work better, and a lot of these services would work better if you could pay into some kind of pension, if there was some kind of profit sharing from the top streamers compared to the small streamers. YouTube also would be better if all the ad revenue and wasn't going to the top streamers and top video creators on YouTube. There is also weirdness in that, like, famous actors can be streaming and get millions of views and potentially getting ad revenue for that they don't need, where they are hurting the chances of small content creators from getting views. Sniper Ranger, I'm responding fairly slowly, says, I'm still playing. Are you still playing Tri Brigade? Are you playing the new support at least? Question mark. I don't know what the new support would be, so probably not. The journey with Tri Brigade has been fairly long, in that I have tried to make 2 other decks since Tri Brigade and not been able to learn how to play the 2 other decks. There was the one with all the birds first, and I couldn't get anywhere with that. It was a deck where you were summoning all these bird-like characters, and you were banishing them, and then they would unbanish themselves from there. Then there was an attempt at making a Tier Laments deck, and I couldn't figure out how to play a Tier Laments deck, even though I was seeing other people playing it. Right now, I haven't been paying a lot of attention to the meta, so I don't know what people are really playing. I assume it's still probably Tier Laments. Sniper Ranger said he got the Master Rank. Congratulations. I'm not... It would be nice to get the Mastered Rank once to get the frame, but it probably would take too much work to maintain Master Rank. Plus, I'm not sure even what the rewards are. We'll check that out. The birds are called Flow Wander. Yeah, that was the other day. So yeah, twice now I've tried to get away from Tri Brigade, and that has drained the number of crafting points I have as a free-to-play player. So I could potentially look at this Link 5, a new Link 5. Is that the name of the card, actually? And see if that could do an upgrade on Tri-Brigade. A modification of Tri-Brigade does have better chances of success, in my opinion, than trying to get me to learn a whole new strategy. Even when you look at like the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, it was very progressive changes that were made to Yugi's deck. He didn't come out with a brand new deck with brand new cards, really. Not in a realistic way. It was always the enemies that he was fighting that would have the brand new deck, and you would learn about new cards almost 90% of the time from the enemies he was fighting. And if you had somebody who put up a good challenge to Yugi, he would pull out usually just one card in it that was new to his deck, that he had just added one single card to his deck to solve it. But yeah, as far as I recall, it was mostly Dark Magician and then Dark Magician's assistant. And then, yeah, Blackluster Ritual and Dark Magician of Chaos, or whatever that card was. Every now and then Yugi would play against a friend and end up getting a card from a friend, like Red Eye's Black Dragon. And then that might be in his deck for a little while, but it kind of seems like it disappeared. Which, yeah, that's that small incremental change where you're really only talking about one card being different every couple of episodes in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime is much more ingestible mentally than actually playing Master Duel and having to potentially have 3 or 4 main decks that you swap between for which have potentially 60 extra cards, different cards in them. Yeah. I'm trying to get to the end of this game so I can look up this support card, Link 5. They also said there's also the Tri-Brigade Sprite. Which I'll try and look that up. I assume that's a card too. Before you start the next duel, I'll show you the new Link 5. Yeah. Well, the thing here is this guy's just moving too slow, even for me. I'm still having major problems with Twitter/X. When I click on a page, it wants to, with a buy trial package. I'm not sure how that works, but we'll get to it as soon as this game ends. Sprites are an engine to the... I'm gonna have to adjust the size of this chat so I can read the rest of it to the deck. So they apparently are pretty important. Marvel Snap, which for the most part I've completely stopped playing, is reiterating or updating their roadmap. PC launch still hasn't happened, even though there is a PC version, which is really just a port of the mobile version. Twitch drops, not interesting really to me. Card upgrade improvements could be better. Like the way you can upgrade cards in Marvel Snap is kind of crazy because it just goes on forever and it is just visual changes. Seasonal audio would maybe be alright, but then you're definitely going to have some seasons where the audio sucks. Polishing the Conquest mode they added would definitely be helpful because that Conquest mode really nearly ruined Marvel Snap as it was before, and it wasn't much to begin with. But particularly in the Conquest mode, there was a podcaster who was talking about how he made it to the infinite level in Marvel Conquest, which is like the master level in Yu-Gi-Oh! And he was still just playing against bots, and he had just broken the system and beaten the game effectively. And once he had that sense of closure, and with that sense of closure, he just didn't want to play the game anymore, which that's always been my feeling with Marvel Snap in the first place, is that you have a game here that that at its core is just a 3-minute at most experience, and because it is a 3-minute at most experience, there's just not a lot you can do in that 3 minutes to have a real experience or a real fun. Sniper Ranger says, with sprites, an engine of the deck by trials help counter tiers. I'm trying to make sure I'm up to date on the chat. Yeah. Let's do this. This is taking too long. I need to learn to just surrender, even if I'm playing ranked. Like, yes, maybe you would get a disconnect and win, but also this guy's just wrecking my strategy, which is obviously an old strategy and not working. Okay. So, I assume that I'm supposed to go to this. And then let's go copy deck. Copy to my deck. And then edit deck. Let's see if we can figure this out to start with. Link 5. Okay, we've got several cards coming up for Link 5. Is there something called Link 5? Or is there a card that Link summons for the 5th time? Hit related cards. Okay. Related cards to what? This one? We have all of these. We don't have this in the extra deck. We don't have this in the extra deck. We don't have that in the extra deck. We don't have that in the deck. We don't have that in the deck. We do have that in the deck. So, if Link 5 was these guys, then I do have these. Although that's not exactly Link 5. These are the Zodiac part, though. They get to Zeus. You have the Link 5. Okay, so I got this deck off the the internet, so it had already figured that part out. So then also Tri Brigade Sprite, SPRIGHT. Let's see what we have here. Sprite Gamma Burst is probably not it. Sprite Double Cross is probably not it. The Arms Bucephalus. Is that on the screen? There are some things with Sprite in the name, certainly. Alright. Let's try this. Arms. Boosie. Val. See if that works. Tri Brigade Arms Bucephalus. How many? We have one of these. Can't be summoned from the deck unless you have 3 or more Tri Brigade spells or traps in your graveyard. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects. Okay, I really don't have crafting points to make more than one of these. You want to stick to pure version of your or you want to try the Sprite version? I mean, we could definitely try the Sprite version, since we're trying to make a difference here anyways. Okay, so I can put one of those in reasonably, but is that really the only thing? Only thing to really change here? Because I mean, that's easy enough to do. I would just assumedly toss one of these to balance that out. I could even see an argument of having 2 of these if I had 2 of these. So yeah, there's, remember, a 30-second delay here, Sniper Ranger, on the chat. So do I need to make any other changes if we're doing the Sprite version of this deck? Or do I need to make a ton of changes to the point where this would take like 5 minutes? I send a link. I don't think you can send links in YouTube comments or chats. That's part of the problem there. Not unless there is like something in the friend zone. Unless you friended me, which maybe you have. I've been bitten by that several times too, where I've tried to comment to bigger YouTubers and they have what do these hands mean? Why is one way and one the other? Seems like this guy's online. These two aren't. That's what I'd assume to do. But yeah, I've been... YouTube doesn't really let you send links. Okay. So, is there a key phrase to search that would get to all these sprites? Is it just the word sprite, or is it Tri Brigade? Or is it some other thing? And at a certain level, I will warn that I'm gonna probably have to do this very quickly. Alright. It says you have to make a lot of changes. Okay. What I'll say then is I'll have to look it up myself. Then, yeah. We'll try this new thing. I did look at the word sprite there. I'll look it up when I get some free time and see if I can make this new sprite thing. But people will actually want to see me play, I'm sure, more than they want to see me just build a deck for a long amount of time. Thank you for the insight, though, Sniper Ranger. That at least points me in a direction I might be able to go. But yeah, very possibly it won't just work because I don't have enough crafting points. And I still always have to say that I'm not I'm just not that interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the first place, so I do want to win, but I don't want to spend an extra hour building a deck. Sniper Ranger, if you can try to put a link in the chat, and see if it shows up. I don't know if it will. You can try and friend me on Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's see, can I bring up even my information to show it? No, not really. Not at the moment. And I think you can send a deck that way. Nightbot can put a link in it, obviously, because it's a moderator. But yeah, I think I can figure it out otherwise. If you can type in the part of the link after the HTTPS and the www.something.com, if you could obfuscate it that way, it might work. Meanwhile, I'm surrendering because I'm not paying attention. So everything after like the first / I could probably figure it out from there. Like, particularly if you told me what was before the / as far as what's in between the www.com. But yeah, if Sniper Ranger, if you've put something in the chat, even from my perspective as far as the link, I'm not seeing anything at all, and I can really just have to leave it at that. I think I'll figure it out though. Thanks for pointing me in the right way. So yeah, to wrap up Marvel Snap, there's a lot still in development, but what they're really promising in development is not anything particularly interesting. Marvel Snap, as this short 3-minute card game, is still very much sticking to that 3-minute card game concept, with Conquest Mode changing how you get rewarded. Distinctively, by adding Conquest Mode in Marvel Snap, they've made it so that either you play the regular mode and you get rewards for seasonal rewards, or you play Conquest Mode and you get completely different rewards, which effectively is just trying to get players to play twice as much in a game that is not fun enough to really play twice as much. And I will say I have not seen any other like live service type constantly going game really do that. Although, in all fairness, my favorite lewd waifu gacha game, Destiny Child, almost certainly did do that before I started playing it, because it has a massive amount of different ways you can play for different rewards. But then also, Destiny Child eventually made it so you could just speed run through all of that and automate most of their gameplay modes. Destiny Child, as a reminder, shuts down in service and ends completely in September. So I'm still wrapping it up and just trying to unlock everything for the memorial version, whatever the memorial version actually ends up being, once they shut down all the online elements at least. I wanted to point out, it's not really a big deal, but Minecraft has decided to take a side. Everything is political and there's a side on everything, but in particular, we have seen a small push, I think pretty much just from Disney alone, to promote the new Little Mermaid live action movie. And Minecraft has perhaps accidentally joined the side by releasing the old Disney Jasmine, Snow White, and Belle skins, I guess. Which, yeah, it probably is the case that this is a licensed product, so even Disney is really picking a side against their new live action mermaid. The new Little Mermaid is dark-skinned mermaid. There is like one dark-skinned mermaid in the original cartoon version of the Little Mermaid from Disney. Anyways, in the background, but Ariel in the cartoon was very much light-skinned, and she had red hair, whereas it's black hair in the live action. And Flounder is not really around, or doesn't look like this at all. In the live action one. So I'd imagine, since this is a Disney property and Minecraft is owned by Microsoft, this wasn't a unintentional decision on Disney's part. So perhaps that is a small indication that even Disney has given up the ghost of the live action Little Mermaid. Which is fine, because the movie's already out and they're probably moving to their next live action movie, which they still seem to be fairly committed to that. I don't really get a reason why, though, as far as why they're trying to remake live action versions of their old cartoons when it would make a lot more sense to try to just reanimate their old cartoons. Disney having such a big catalog, and here I'm getting victories because of disconnects, and that's about the only way I do get victories a lot of times. But yeah. Like, they have this major advantage in that they have the voice acting and they have a lot of technology behind them, and so they could take the voice acting from the original like Little Mermaid cartoon, and then they could have they could have a new cheap they have a new cheaper, what am I trying to say? Yeah, Disney could take the audio that's already made, just run it through a cleanup process. I don't think you can fully automate the cleanup process, but you can definitely do noise reduction way better now than you could. And then they could just have cheap Asian animators or Korean animators, Japanese animators, Indian animators, all of which do very good jobs for very little money to reanimate it, and then you would have these kinds of modern anime style Disney movies that you could put back out, and it could be this is a new version of that show of the movie, and then it would be a great way for them to resell the old movies and put the old movies back in theaters, which at a certain level I think movie theaters, which are most AMC, I think is oddly somewhat owned by Disney, if not under the thumb of Disney. We know they're at least under the thumb of Disney. Disney really could just put out cartoons of like the original Little Mermaid cartoon to next week, and people would go and watch it if there was nothing else to do. Particularly now that the Writers Guild strike and actors strike is happening, you now would be the time certainly for Disney to strike and say, hey, we've got movies, we've got old things, let's put them back in theaters and do a re-release. And that would get them money without really having to spend anything at all. But yeah, it definitely makes more sense to reanimate what they already have and reuse whatever they can on that. Even if it's not a new style, it could just be a new remastering. People would love if you just had a remastered Little Mermaid cartoon, and then in the next 6 months you have a remastered of something else. It's kind of crazy that they haven't tried to remaster something as frequent, as new as Frozen. Like, if you said we're going to do a remastered version of Frozen in the theaters, just like they do remastered versions on Blu-ray, then I think kids would go back and watch Frozen. Kids that were kids watching Frozen 1 are now probably 5 to 6 years older anyways. So maybe they would be a little too old to see Frozen and maybe a little too young for nostalgia. But I think they could definitely pull something off like that. It definitely sounds a lot easier than reshooting a whole new movie live action. But I guess in the long run, Disney's, and I don't know why I'm talking about Disney since I'm supposed to be talking about video games, but in the long run, Disney has to have some new content and new identity, and they've run out of ideas. So their plan seems to be at the moment to just remake their old shows in live action and call that creativity when it really isn't. At least in previous decades, Disney would try to make awful sequels to things. There is a Little Mermaid 2. There is a Little Mermaid 3. Sniper Ranger, I haven't responded to his things. He said go to YouTube and look up the deck. Yeah, if I had an exact name, that would be a little bit helpful as far as what I'm looking up on YouTube. And then he said he followed me on Master Duel, by the way. And then he says, anyway, I'm going to go see you later. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for chatting, Sniper Ranger. As we get this one-turn kill victory. People definitely complain about these super long one-turn plays in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yep. Let's see. Follower, Ranger, Profile. Let's see. Replay. So which of these decks, I guess, would be... Are any of these, Sniper Ranger, if you're still there, the deck you're talking about? Type in Master Duel Sprite Tri Brigade and then take some cards from each deck. Okay, I'll try to do that. So let's see what Sniper Ranger's master level latest game looks like, since we can do that. And highlight someone else's gameplay. Someone else who's probably playing a lot better. You'd have to take this particularly slow, certainly, because you'd have to learn each deck and each card. He's playing Tier Laments. He has fairly quickly ended up with 3 things in the graveyard. A lot. It plays back very fast here. And see, even though there is a fast forward button, all I guess I could do is pause and then look and then play, then pause, then play. Alright, well, I don't want to make Sniper Ranger late if you've got to go somewhere, but maybe next time you're in chat, have that deck crafted and have a replay if you've played it. Like, I don't want to also ruin your master thing, so if you play it in free play mode, that's probably better. I'll go back to that menu and see if I could search and find a free play deck. But yeah, next time you're in chat, if you have the deck pre-built, you could definitely play a game while you were chatting, and then I could look at what you play. Although, in all fairness, there is no way to see all of the cards here, so I can only really see what you're playing anyways, so it's probably just gonna need me to look it up anyway. So yeah, replay isn't gonna work now that I think about it. But yeah, this just kind of highlights the problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! And the friend system. Sniper Ranger says, I got the rank and I'm off to work I'm off from work today. Yeah, I'm gonna have to follow your first suggestion and look it up on YouTube. I'll probably look at one of the websites and type in Sprite Tri Brigade and see what one of the websites shows. Let's see. While we're watching this play, I will also mention that I really didn't even do an accountability section today. I have finished, wow, he is chaining a lot, playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It really is a case, I've never seen the chain go full circle like that. That's kind of amazing. But yeah, Shadow of the Tomb Raider ended very disappointingly. I played it a little bit more after I'd finished everything, just to see if the very beginning part that was crashing would crash my computer or crash the app, because that was a very consistent spot where it was crashing before. And yeah, I didn't have any crashes, so I do think it was just the fact that I had overclocked my RAM too high. that it had caused the problem. And I don't even remember when I turned on the overclock, but it must have been a couple of months ago. I must have very flippantly done it without considering the consequences. But yeah. As for the actual gameplay in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it really is just... There's no evolution past the first game in the Tomb Raider reboot series that I really enjoyed. There were some interesting ideas in the first game, and that's kind of it. Let's see. So yeah, replays aren't going to help you either. I can follow this Sniper Ranger and see if maybe... Yeah. Man, there really is just not a good system here. I can definitely do this, though. As SPRI. Yeah, this is probably the easiest way, and the way you would expect, you're expected to do a search. But Sprite, Tri Brigade, or Sprite Try at least, it's not working. I think part of the problem there definitely comes from decks not being able to have names. Yeah, you could send it to me through my defunct Discord and post it there. That should work. Do I have that even listed in the information? As far as the description, though. Let me see. No, I gave up on the Discord thing. Okay. I'm on Twitter if you still use Twitter. You could tweet me a link there. I'm on... I think... Yeah. I don't think you can maybe communicate via Steam. Yeah, I'm on Steam. If you friend me on Steam, you could communicate there. And then I probably would never see it on Facebook or any of the other services. Let's see, Sniper Ranger says look at the 6 deck. Here. 3 face down cards, which definitely seems not very helpful. Visus Starfrost, it looks new. If anything, I think this is probably just highlighting how even the deck lookup system on Steam is, on Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just broken. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go to one of the websites. Let's just open a new tab and see if we can get there. Unless you really think that that is... Unless you really think that that is the deck. No, He says, "Nope, that's trash. Do not look at that." Yeah, that's the problem. It's easiest just to come to a website like this. Here we have the Sprite Tri Brigade, which is adding Sprite Blue, Sprite Jet, Sprite Red, Nimble Beaver, Effect Veller, 3 of this, DD Crow, Ghost Mourner, couple sprites, cards. It looks like forbidden cards, so this might just be a deck that doesn't work now. Master Duel meta is what he wants me to go to. Okay. We will go back to Master Duel meta. This website. That's one I've heard of before. Doing this on screen. Alright. So at Master Duel meta now. Do I look up top decks, or do you want me to specifically search Sprite Tri Brigade? Because generally the way I've done this before is I've just gone to like top decks and then tried to find one that I could do. So here's this like new Sprite one here. Let's see. This is by date. This would be by price. Go to top decks. Okay, we're at top decks. Price, being price conscious might be the best move. We don't want the most expensive, so let's go to this one. This doesn't feel like this is a Sprite deck, though, per se. At least it's not Sprite Tri Brigade. Which maybe I should just get a it says look up a Sprite card. Okay. I clicked on a Sprite card. Tri Brigade Sprite here. Let's assume this with the delay. This one's second place at the Millennial Cup season number 3, July 23rd. Okay. Share to Master Duel. Nope. Share to clippable board. Look up a Tri Brigade card. Well, see, this is what I was going to do off screen too, is just do this and see if this works. Let's see if we can. Let's get this to work. Edit deck. Thought you could just copy and paste these decks. Copied from linked deck list. Nope, that all requires going through the other service, doesn't it? So, really, do I actually have to go? Do I have to actually go and do this manually? It kind of feels like I do. That I have to just manually start a new one, and that there is just no paste. What does this actually say? I didn't actually look at this. Alright. to export, you need to be logged in to the website of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards database. You need a Konami ID. Wow. Manually click to copy the export code here. Go to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards database and click My Deck, Add Deck. Wow. That's just a lot of work. Alright, so I do have to manually go here, but Sniper Ranger does say this is the deck to make. Okay. Well, you've helped me get where I need to go. I will do the work off screen, though. It's going to be incredibly boring, and we need to actually need to cover video game news and actually play, even if we're not playing the best deck. Sniper Ranger, I will build the deck as is on this page, and we'll try and play it and show it off if you need to give me any more advice or help next time you're in chat. Yeah, otherwise from the accountability section, I fixed my version 4 of the automation of uploading videos, and it's getting a little bit better, but it still seems to run into some problems. But whatever, it's almost 100% automated now. Sniper Ranger says you may need to make some minor tweaks. Yeah, there's a decent chance I'll start building it and then I'll realize I don't have the crafting points or the cards that that I would need, and it may just be unattainable as a concept. But getting in on the ground floor, perhaps with the Sprite Tri-Brigade deck, opens up the possibility of a upgraded Tri-Brigade deck lasting longer, instead of trying to make a full new deck like Tier Laments or Flow Ender. Sniper Ranger says, anyway, see you next time. Yeah, see you next time. Thanks for chatting again. Always need people to hop in the chat and be extremely chatty. As long as you're not trolling or irritating me in some other way. I love it when people put comments, because YouTube loves it when people engage and put comments. And I actually do enjoy the actual act of communicating with people. Apparently the super polys are not mandatory in the deck that I was looking at. But yeah, I've been watching Medium on Amazon Prime, rewatching an old show, and boy, I did not really realize how rough the first season of Medium really is, and perhaps the entire series of Medium. Like, I definitely have probably only in the past only watched a few episodes here and there of Medium for its 4 or 5 seasons that it ran, and so I probably thought, oh, I just managed to catch a few episodes that were about like horrific killers, rapists, child killers. Like almost every story in Medium is a child has been killed, or raped then killed, or killed then raped. I mean, it's almost every single episode in that first season. On top of that, you just have this high amount of like argument between Patricia Arquette, the Medium lady, and her husband, and I just think the balance in the writing there is off. Or the person who was writing the stories was going through a nasty time between his own marriage with his own wife, because it's like just every conversation that they choose to show in that first season is them arguing. And there's like one spot I was watching it and I'm like, yeah, they're arguing here, and this is like the 8th or 9th episode, and they've argued in every episode basically over the same thing, where the husband says maybe your visions aren't true, and then the show again and again proves that the visions are true, or the husband eventually evolves to maybe you're misinterpreting the vision, and it's going to mean something else. The only balance you get, at least in that first season, is that you have the 3 daughters that are, I guess, supposed to be more of the loving family, but the loving happy part. But there's definitely a sequence where the husband and wife are arguing, then they make up, and then they indicate that they're about to have a pleasant experience between each other, not sexual per se, just they're going to go out to eat, and they're going to have a more calm, nice conversation, and the show just fades to black and then fades back to another point where they're arguing again. So it's like the showrunner themselves are not interested in showing a balanced perspective. It's just like only the arguments are interesting, only the conflict is interesting. So it creates this weird situation, particularly in modern times, where it's just like, why are these two really even together, even though they do have 3 children, like one baby. It feels more like there would have probably been a divorce before that point, in modern times. And in a lot of ways, I guess it kind of feels like they, in that first season, they're doing something closer to Roseanne, the original Roseanne series, where it's a really poor family that's rather big, going through family drama, where I'm kind of hoping, as I continue to watch Medium, since I've got nothing else to watch at the moment, that in later seasons it kind of just more focuses on the family part of the show being her foundation and her support group, and the horror of the show, which I'm actually very shocked that the show even was released on like primetime TV when it was, because yeah, it really is going against something like Law and Order Special Victims Unit type show. But yeah, it is my hope that in later seasons the family becomes more of the support group and the foundation, and the horrors happen outside of the house. And I'm hoping that's really how it goes. I think also there's more of I'd hope that there's more of an emphasis of her doing things outside of the house, and interacting with criminals and the police that she works for more, so that those characters would be more emphasized. They did fix, after the pilot, at least her ridiculously long hair. Like, it's just not really feasible. But yeah, you can see I'm not really doing much otherwise. I'm still taking it easy in the summer heat. Video game news though. Gosh, it's been an hour. This is probably going to be our last game for today, and it looks like it can't really do anything. GameDeveloper.com says a new Twitch policy forbids streamers from promoting gambling sites. Gambling promotions for Counter-Strike Global offensive skins have boomed over on Twitch, and the streaming platform is working to cut it off from growing further. I don't know if that is particularly super recent, that it has boomed more than it has just always boomed. Valve really still has only taken very minimal efforts, and maybe there really isn't too much more they could have done to stop people from trading and gambling Counter-Strike Go skins, which have gotten ridiculously, at least in the past, were ridiculously expensive. The real thing Valve needs to do is shut down the marketplace for Counter-Strike Go skins, which would be effectively just shutting down the Valve marketplace completely, and it would cut off a juicy source of revenue for Valve. Valve has made new Counter-Strike Go content, so Counter-Strike Go might be back to being fairly popular, which almost certainly would have increased the amount of gambling skins things. Meanwhile, it's still important to point out that some percentage of streamers left Twitch to go to Kick, which Kick, to my understanding, is a streaming service run by a gambling website that is actively advertising itself and gambling in general to viewers on Kick. On one level, I would say nobody has enough money to really afford to be gambling. And if you do have enough money to afford to be gambling, then you probably should be taxed more. On the other level, it is also seemingly human nature to gamble or want to gamble, so perhaps a different level of embracing that idea might make some sense. As a YouTube content creator and somebody who's desperate for income, who would love to get some more income, I think myself and probably most people, most content creators on YouTube, would be totally willing to go down that dark path of promoting gambling sites if we could do it in a safe way and getting ad revenue from that, paying into making profit off of people's less than logical thought processes. I won't say every single person who gambles is addicted to gambling or has an addictive personality or is a gambleaholic or anything like that, but it is definitely less than logical to gamble overall. And yeah. But then again, you can also say it is less than logical to eat sugar and drink sodas, and people are allowed to do that, even though that hurts them as much as gambling sometimes could hurt. At a certain point, you have to either believe in giving people free choice, or you don't believe in it, and then you just believe in some level of totalitarian dictatorship or rule. Now, I still have this major problem as we move to the next story, where the information I have and the process at which I get information as far as new games coming out do not line up well to tell me the actual day games are being released. So I've been seeing news about Baldur's Gate. I almost certainly saw a headline that said Baldur's Gate is releasing on a certain day. Yesterday, I guess, was the day. And we can see the GameDeveloper.com article here. It says Baldur's Gate already has 500,000 concurrent players on Steam. So definitely there was some pent-up excitement around that game's release um, through its advertising, which I guess it did a pretty decent job advertising itself, except for the fact that I just never pay attention to the actual release dates. And so I always get surprised personally when one of these games is coming out. Well, if anything, there's just so many games that are nebulously coming out in the future. It's surprising, particularly this year, when anything actually does come out. It's almost like I'm living in a world of promises that never actually get delivered upon. And that is kind of the case for video games in particular. Lego on Twitter said, due to personal reasons, we'll be building the Lego cottage to escape reality for a while. I wonder if this is a cutesy way of saying that they are not going to tweet as much or use social media in general as much, or if this is just a joke. That's kind of an odd thing to say. You would think you'd just put like a JK smiley face after it. And if you're a big corporation like Lego, the decision to just get off all social media really isn't an option. You would just replace one social media manager with another. Meanwhile, there is also a coinciding leak that is happening around Lego that there are potentially several Animal Crossing sets, official Lego Animal Crossing crossover with Nintendo sets coming next year, I believe it was. Which at a certain level that does make a lot of sense. If there was any game that kind of works with Lego, it would be Animal Crossing, since Animal Crossing is about doing a lot of decorating and world building, but mostly it's just decorating in Animal Crossing. And I could see having a bunch of Animal Crossing sets and houses and a few trees here and there for the outside, benches, things like that. That might work very well. Although Animal Crossing has animal characters that are standing on their two legs, bipedal animal characters. So any minifigs you make from the set are going to not really match visually with just your standard Lego minifig humanoid. And so, yeah, much like the Super Mario Lego sets, which stood out by being slightly different, I feel like even the Animal Crossing sets are going to stand out by slightly different. I wouldn't be surprised if the color palette is way more bright and colorful and video game looking, cartoony looking, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's several custom pieces that just would not make a lot of sense in any other Lego set. But I guess in general, Lego has to do these licenses because left to their own devices, they make something like Lego Dreams, which is just a weird mess of sets advertising the Netflix Lego Dreams cartoon. And yeah, pretty much all the original Lego concepts since Ninjago have been pretty poor successes. I would say Lego Friends in its second series maybe is alright as a success. So, but it does definitely feel like Lego fails 4 or 5 times on original content concepts before they find one that even slightly succeeds. Whereas licensing things out is almost always a major success. Although I do question the way they're doing the Lego Soccer license sets. YouTube Gaming. Once again, I guess just desperate for attention or just desperate to tweet anything out, decided to retweet Dr. Disrespect, who would be live in 30 minutes 9 hours ago, having an official YouTube watch party for the IEM Cologne 2023 quarterfinal matches, which I'd assume this is some kind of Counter-Strike Go matches. Yeah. Seeing Cloud9 there, I almost thought it was a Magic the Gathering match, but no. I'm not really sure where Dr. Disrespect is at this point. Like, is he still streaming on YouTube? Was he paid some money to go to YouTube, or did he go to YouTube after Twitch kicked him out? I think the story and the drama from a year or two ago was that Twitch kicked him out, he went to YouTube, and I really haven't heard much about him otherwise. Yep. That being said, it's just weird for YouTube gaming to not tweet more. There's plenty of stuff to tweet about. Now, there are definitely some content creators out there that are just desperate to tweet anything or get into that Instagram, TikTok type mentality where you're putting out three to a dozen shorts or TikToks a day to try to get interactions, and you're just covering anything and everything, and you don't really stick to your main purpose and your main focus. And I'm glad YouTube gaming on Twitter particularly isn't going that route, but they do tweet particularly infrequently when there are definitely some more tweets you could make. You could say every single day, you could say we had this many people watching, searching YouTube gaming, or the hot game for the day was this game, the best viewed video for the day was this video. Like, people are always doing something gaming wise, and yeah, it almost feels like YouTube gaming very possibly is being run by somebody who has to make a suggestion, and then it has to go up the ladder of management several rungs before some manager in some committee approves the tweet, and by the time the tweet is approved, it is either too late and so they give up on it, or it is just not relevant, so they tweet it and it doesn't matter. And you need to move a lot faster. It's been a slow week overall as far as trying to get through news. Genshin Impact version 4 update As Light as Rain falls without reason, launches August 16th, which, it being version 4.0, I think just increasingly makes it obvious that unfortunately I cannot jump to a game like Genshin Impact, which there definitely would have been an argument that had Destiny Child never caught my interest, I potentially would have tried to play Genshin Impact. I did try to play it for a while, and Genshin Impact is just not an automated game anyways, so I never really would have had time to play it. But there is perhaps a bit of a shame in the fact that Genshin Impact seems to be one of the biggest and most visually polished and possibly one of the best mobile phone games out there, and I just don't have time to really engage with it or even keep an eye on it. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle has an article that says Hideki Kamiya thinks Japan should be proud of the JRPG and wants to use the phrase J-Action. This is the Platinum Games exec. There had been some criticism, I think, from the Final Fantasy XVI creator, who in general seems to be able to let himself get quoted in fairly inflammatory comments, or at least controversial comments, where, if I'm recalling correctly, he didn't like the phrase JRPG and thought that it was discriminatory to say this game is a Japanese RPG game, whereas a Western RPG game like, well, let's just say Borderlands, that's a very different style game, but it is an RPG game still. World of Warcraft is probably a better one, or even Diablo. Uh, but yeah, there definitely felt like there was a feeling amongst the creator, producer, director, whoever of Final Fantasy 16 that you're saying, I want my game to be just thought of as an RPG and thought of as the same level as the Western games, which really I think just highlights how there's a lot of people, if you're in the West, who think Japan is cool, and there's a lot of people, particularly in the game development, you see this with the Death Stranding creator too, who think the West is cool, think Hollywood is cool, and they think of Hollywood basically as being the entire United States and the entire West, when really it isn't. The From my perspective, my opinion I can throw out there is that Japanese RPGs are labeled as Japanese RPGs not because they are inferior to other forms of RPGs. It is because they are incredibly superior than other forms of RPGs. A Chinese RPG is a direct, slightly discriminatory description I use. When I say Chinese RPG, I mean this is a low quality Chinese RPG game that is going to have poorly translated story and is going to maybe look pretty but play poorly and just never really catch on and never be anywhere as good as Dragon Quest games or Final Fantasy games. Japanese basically invented RPGs, and let's face it, Japanese mostly invented almost all game genres because the Japanese companies were making the video games and the consoles. If the West had made RPG games, we would have made things that were much more like Skyrim, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. That's where our influences were. So, yeah, there's just decades and decades of Dragon Quest games being good, decades and decades of Final Fantasy games being good, plenty of other Japanese RPGs I'm not mentioning in that list. And over the years, they've only gotten as good. They've stayed good, or if they've potentially even gotten better. Plus, there's just a long history of Japanese people in particular being willing to play RPGs at a much higher amount of time than Westerners will. Most Westerners will not commit to playing Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and Atelier games and several other games in the course of a year. At best, we'll see with Starfield, Westerners being willing to play Starfield. But had you put out Fallout 4 and Starfield in the same year, Westerners would have not played Fallout 4. So, Platinum Games is more into the field of making action games, so them adding a J action phrase kind of makes sense too. There really isn't the best descriptor of what a Bayonetta game is. It is like super crazy high action games. But if you did make that separate category and say, well, the Bayonetta games clearly have a heavy Japanese influence, although I'm not sure how much the Japanese influence is actually influencing the action gameplay, that definitely could mean something different than a lot of other games on Steam that have action as a tag because there's a little bit of action. But yeah, it really would come down to whether the term actually became popular. And you can see here at least two big name Japanese people have come out against or come out on different sides of the idea of JRPGs. Yep. That they're saying that JRPG was popularized in the 90s as a means for the press and video game fans to differentiate between PC RPGs, which were mostly made by Western developers, and console RPGs, which were mostly made by the Japanese franchises such as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. Which, yeah, that split now does not make any sense at all. And it really didn't even make sense back then to say all PC games were Western developed and all console developed games were Japanese made, particularly Japanese. Earlier this year, Final Fantasy producer Naoki Yoshida told SkillUp that he wasn't a big fan of the JRPG term, saying that in the past it felt like a discriminatory term with negative connotations, which, I mean, not an invalid feeling to have, particularly when in the past, because it definitely seems like you could take it that way. But I think in common vernacular, most gamers today aren't thinking from that perspective, and it doesn't really help the current conversation to try to fix perceived slights in the past when those are just the words being used. Although, isn't that the same argument that they always make as far as word policing? And I guess that's really what this is just coming down to, is the Japanese people, the Final Fantasy 16 developer would like to word police gamers and tell them not to use the phrase JRPG, and anytime somebody tries to word police you, the response is going to be a heavy pushback, even his colleagues aren't really agreeing with him. I don't think the Japanese producer has many friends in the industry. By the sound of it, he seems to be particularly gruff personality. Generally, I'd say also the Japanese are not willing to complain publicly about anything, so it is very, very Japanese for somebody just to go thumbs up and like, sure, I agree with that. They'll agree with it to your face, and then they'll ignore you or talk behind your back if they actually don't agree with it. But in general, the Japanese people as a society have a whole culture of agreeing with each other and just allowing mob rule. There isn't a lot of open public debate about anything in Japanese society. But yeah. And certainly people in the West, I think there's a large group of people who just can't adapt, can't grow, and don't want to grow as far as word policing. Like I think it's very reasonable to say people shouldn't say derogatory, hurtful names to against people. I'm thinking, say, the hurtful words you would call a homosexual person, a gay person. Like it's very reasonable if a term has always been used as an insult or a slur to say don't use that slur. It's a bigger leap in logic and a lot harder to adjust to say you can't say gay. So I definitely remember when they started pushing that campaign to say don't say gay on kids, and I'm like, well, it depends on what context you're using that. Like, if I say that person happens to be gay and there's no hate meant in it, I feel like it's fairly fine to say that. But if in most cases for kids and teenagers they're saying you're gay as an insult and there is hate or meanness behind it, then that is, I'm sure, what the campaign is really trying to address. But then you have games like Gearbox that have midget enemies, and now they're saying don't call them midgets, which in the game they were called midgets. And I don't have any hate or disdain or meanness when I say somebody's a midget. It's just that's what they are. That's their medical condition. That's how they were born. Moving on, because obviously that's one of those topics that's never going to have a real ending to it. GameStop is ending support for the crypto and NFT wallet in November, which perhaps this is more of an example of GameStop getting back on track. They're saying it's due to regulatory uncertainty of the crypto space, which there's always been regulatory uncertainty in the crypto space. But I also feel like the chief finance officer here, Diana Sadijaji, departed, leaves in August after tendering a resignation last month. So basically the chief financial officer potentially here only was staying with GameStop in the hopes that crypto would pay off, or in an obsession with crypto. And you would think that all the GameStonk supporters on Reddit, all the people who really want to see GameStop succeed, might also be the same crypto bros on Reddit, but I think it's actually a fairly separate group of people. And maybe that was what GameStop failed to realize in launching crypto and NFTs, is that they thought they could get in on the meme of crypto and get the crypto bros on Reddit to support GameStop, and I just don't think anybody bought into that idea. And I haven't really heard anything as far as crypto bros on Reddit recently. Reddit has its own problems, certainly, but just yesterday I clicked on a Reddit link and there's still posts complaining about the API being taken down, just on a random message. I'm trying a new app called Ground News to get actual news instead of random stuff on Reddit, and then see how well I can personalize that to get the headlines I actually care about. So far it's somewhat rough in that it is telling me about news stories I don't particularly care that much about. Moving on, Master Detective Archives rain code shipments and digital sales have topped 300,000 1 month after its release, which that's a decent amount of sales in a month. It's definitely not 500,000 in one day, but this spiritual successor to Danganronpa having even this much success is actually very, very high, considering how weird this game is, how under advertised and promoted the game is. I really wouldn't have even been able to tell you that it was already out as a game. Like, I totally would have believed that they were still just promoting it and advertising it. Platinum Games in general has also been doing this thing where they are promoting the original soundtrack and linking to songs, or at least one song. Otherwise, I don't think they really have anything to be talking about at the moment after this wonderful 101 DLC, free update content. Which, you know, that's not a terrible idea in general, that if you've got nothing to promote in your company that makes video games, promote the soundtrack. Sure, soundtracks aren't really a thing anymore, but it does make a decent amount of sense to say, hey, if I need to say something and we have the soundtrack and we are giving away or selling the soundtrack, let's promote it. At a certain level, by promoting the soundtrack, you're promoting the music and audio people that worked on the game. It would also make a lot of sense to try and promote the other characters who worked on the game, the writers, the animators, the artists, management. Even if you can find creative ways to highlight each of those persons' work or highlight them individually, you could definitely create a feed with a lot more positivity and promotion, particularly if you're just needing something to tweet, which a lot of these businesses do just need something to tweet. Guilty Gear Strive here has topped 2.5 million players according to Gamatsu. Here's the Lego Animal Crossing sets, claiming insiders. 5 sets have been reported with prices ranging from $15 to $75. So not going to be super big sets. But looking at this, you have humanoid here, and then mostly animal characters otherwise. Which, the way they're depicted here, it's not particularly like a minifig. And noticeably, they're not really showing, in this picture, any of the decorating or the inside of building aspects. They're showing off sawing and fishing and maybe chopping wood or farming. Which, yeah, it seems like it ranges from 170 pieces to 535 pieces, which 535 is not super big. I wouldn't be surprised if this is true, which is still just basically a rumor, that you'll have very custom molded heads for like the raccoons characters and animal characters, and maybe you'll have somewhat standard minifig bodies, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is all just like very round custom molded heads, round custom molded bodies, and at some point it stops feeling even like it is Lego at all, just because of how custom it is. A teaser for a Lego Harry Potter game reportedly appeared briefly on Instagram, according to Video Games Chronicle. It's believed that a Harry Potter game in the style of the Skywalker saga is in development. Very believable. That being said, they're going to have to rush fairly quickly to get a new Harry Potter Lego game out before the reboot of the the reboot of the Harry Potter movies starts to come out. Although, maybe not. It's going to just depend on how much any of these Harry Potter kids in the Lego game, whatever this new Lego game would be, have to actually look like the kids in the rebooted movie series. Warner Brothers, though, it is important to point out, is just this giant question mark ever since it's been acquired by AT&T. But if anything, I would tend to believe that Warner Brothers, particularly with the strike, is going to struggle to have movies, it's going to struggle to have TVs. So putting more of their funding and development into video game development and TT Games as a subsidiary makes a lot of sense. Particularly since I'm not sure there are that many more things you could license to make new Lego games on. I guess you could probably try to make a Discworld series of Lego games or a Song of Earth and Fire, but you're definitely going to start to get into lesser known books very quickly if you were to do that. Even the remakes are fairly questionable if you're just trying to remake old Lego games, because you're almost certainly not going to remake the Indiana Jones games, because Indiana Jones just didn't succeed in popularity. You might remake the Lord of the Rings, but most of the Marvel games that are based somewhat on Phase 1 of the Marvel movies, or at least characters from Phase 1 of the Marvel movies, you probably can't remake all of those. So I would say at least half of all the Lego games, if you've got a long list of all the Lego games that existed, really couldn't be remastered and remade in the Skywalker Saga engine and the Unreal Engine, is what it is. And you're going to get diminishing returns. They won't get diminishing returns with Harry Potter. Harry Potter is still very popular. Fantastic Beasts did not supersede Harry Potter by any means. And Warner Brothers, I'm sure, is also involved in the movie remake of Harry Potter, which maybe is being made in the UK, so maybe the union strike is not affecting that as much. Because, yeah, if the American unions are striking, filming in the UK probably still can continue. And that definitely has been a threat from management as far as the Screen Actors and the Writers Guild, is that they would just move all production to other countries where union representation either not non-existent or not as strong. Apparently the Super Mario Brothers movie has raked in $1.35 billion at the box office. Which, yeah, that's a lot of money, certainly, and almost certainly we will see another Nintendo movie coming out relatively quickly. I don't think Super Mario Brothers is still in theaters at this point, though, so I assume this is just either the final reporting as far as how much it's made at the box office, which the box office is an old phrase, certainly at this point. It doesn't make a lot of sense in modern times. It could be that the Mario movie is still in theaters in other countries. But yeah. I don't think it's going to get much higher since it's already at the best-selling spot anyways. I said I had stopped playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I'd finished the game, and then coincidentally I saw here 2 hours ago they're saying they're hosting Girls Making Games. It was an honor. They're grateful to everyone on the team. And then what caught my eye is the screenshot here. So this is a Summer Camp 2023 Girls Make Games. I would assume this is a case that these are supposed to just be like teenage girls, little girls, going to a special gender segregated camp to learn to make games. Here you have what seems to me to be just very visually diverse and ethnically diverse characters that I wouldn't be able to really place into a video game, with the exception of Lara Croft here, unless this is actually supposed to be a cosplayer cosplaying Lara Croft. Let's assume that's not the case. You have a lady here that seems to be holding VR, and then you have what look like very cutesy computers and laptops. Muslim girl, and then blue-haired girl and red-haired girl of light skin color. Maybe this is supposed to be an Asian because her eyes are squinting and she's smiling, where her eyes are wide and everybody else's eyes are wide, but she may just be happy and squinting. What caught my eye mostly though about this is the whole Tomb Raider reboot was an effort throughout the entire game to establish Lara Croft in a different outfit. She had full-length pants covering all of her legs. She had no neckline on a darker blue shirt that covered her shoulders. There were other outfits, and a lot of outfits in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, frankly, that don't make any sense. Most of them are just like skin pelt costumes. But almost all the outfits in Shadow of the Tomb Raider tries to cover up her skin as much as this lady over here, this Muslim girl, is covered up. And so there was always that push to say, this is our Lara Croft, this is what Lara Croft is. And we now see Crystal Dynamics, outside of the influence of Square Enix, promoting the old Lara Croft. Back to the hot pants, back to two gun holsters, with the belts on the bottom of the gun holsters go below her hot pant legs, back to a V-neck blue shirt, light blue shirt, and back to leg showing and arm showing. So as far as Crystal Dynamics, which is owned by Embracer Group and now owns Lara Croft, it seems to me like this is the Lara Croft they want to promote. I don't know when we're going to get another Lara Croft game, She's a good mascot. That is the one thing I can say about Lara Croft as a character, so it makes a lot of sense that she would show up in this promotion for the summer camp. Um, Otherwise, Crystal Dynamics I don't think has much to really talk about or promote in general. Uh, but yeah, almost certainly I would say it is Crystal Dynamics' intention at this time to have Lara Croft go back to feeling like Lara Croft visually. She isn't going to be low polygon with triangle boobs or anything like that, like the original Lara Croft game. But she isn't also going to be a dark, gritty character that is fully covered up, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and this most recent reboot trilogy. Um, Mostly, it's not the appearance of Lara Croft that is the problem, though, and this image can't give any hint to this, but I would hope that the next Lara Croft game that's made gives her back her acrobatic ability, because she just doesn't do any like cartwheels or side jumping, and she, in particularly in Shadow of Tomb Raider, she doesn't really jump from rooftop to rooftop unless it is a cinematic scene where they want you to jump from rooftop to rooftop, which happens maybe once in the whole game. You're inside this hidden city section for most of the game, I would say, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and you have to just slowly walk on the ground next to other people. You can kind of run, but the run's not really that fast while walking through the hidden city. But there really is just no level there where she feels like she could just climb any wall and get over any building. It is so far from what an Assassin's Creed game would have been, and it just doesn't work that way when you think about how the Tomb Raider series, the first Tomb Raider, was a 3D platformer much closer to something like Mario 64. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is not that at all. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is just like always on the ground, shooting things with bows and arrows, or pulling out a gun and shooting something with a gun. It feels kind of even like Gears of War in its final encounter, because you're doing cover-based shooting at that point for the first time in the game. I need to continue moving. YouTube has introduced some remixing tools, or at least it's going to introduce some remixing tools. A lot of it, I think, is perhaps just in their mobile app. They definitely, though, are trying to make it a more of a thing as far as making shorts easier. And one of the remixing tools that they announced, and it doesn't seem like it's being mentioned here on this page, is a way to rotate out wide horizontal videos into vertical videos to make them in the shorts and to clip things up in the shorts, which that definitely would be helpful in the long run, is if we can. If I could clip up some of my older videos and turn them into shorts, although for most of my content I don't think that's going to work particularly well, and I'm not going to really try too hard on that. This was a tweet from a while ago from the ESA retweeting it, where you have a Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference having a diversity in video games competition. Do we have the day? No, but you can write this VesiEvents@gmail by September 1st. That to submit your game, I guess, and finalists will be flown to Washington, D.C. The Congressional Black Caucus would be everybody in Congress who is black, getting together and discussing issues that specifically are focused around black people. Both sides of the aisle, generally speaking, should be there, but probably not in equal numbers. Let's just face it, one side of the Congress has more black people than the other. Or at least I would assume that's the case. At a certain point, this is ESA trying to do something like a lobbyist, but not particularly really doing much of anything. It's throwing it, which this is the problem with the ESA in general, is that they tend to never really seem like they're actually doing anything helpful. They're really throwing it to just people who make games to show off their stuff, and then go to Washington D.C. for the ESA to show off their stuff. And people who make games are going to have an opinion as far as diversity in video games and video game development, but whatever opinion they have may not be the overall opinion as far as people working in the game industry. I would say, though, it does seem like there's probably not enough black people making video games, considering how many black people are in the United States and how many black people like to play video games. The fact that there even is this competition and this conversation potentially happening, though, does show that we're getting younger people in Congress to some level, whereas even 5-10 years ago, all the old fogies that run Congress would have not really cared about video games at all, other than to just say video games cause violence or some other nonsense that people in Congress often spout. Night Dive Studio a while ago also put out an update as far as Sin Reloaded. Basically, I think they're saying that they have had to focus on other things, and that is, the project isn't dead, but is taking longer. Project also is going through some changes, which, yeah, they are struggling. Night Dive Studio, I watched a YouTube video talking about it, is actually a company that was formed very abruptly without much of a plan by two programmers who weren't really qualified to run Night Dive. Maybe there's been some more people that have come in and helped them grow as a company. Certainly, I think that's the case, but all they really wanted to do originally with Night Dive Studios was get System Shock 1 playable. Like, that was their original goal, is that they wanted System Shock 1 to be patched so it could be playable and then potentially released on good old games. They eventually did do that using somebody else's code from some custom mod that seemed to just disappear off the internet, I think was what happened there. But in the process, they contacted a insurance company that ended up owning the rights to System Shock in general, and they got asked to remake System Shock 1, which eventually they did, as far as so there was a patch version of System Shock so it would just play. Then there was a remake or remaster of System Shock 1, was what they were asked to do next, which they eventually did remaster System Shock 1 after a lot of delays and a lot of struggle. Again, just not really planning to form a company, and didn't really seem to know what to do to form a company. But yeah, in the meantime, there is also the remake of System Shock that's still, I think, in development. So it does seem to me like, while Night Dive Studio has mostly done pretty good by its development and releases of old games, it still seems to struggle with everything else. They most recently released Rise of the Triad, ludicrous edition, which if you liked Rise of Triad or knew what it is, playing it makes some sense. But then a lot of these other games, if you don't know what they are, aren't that good. They didn't do a great job with the Blade Runner Enhanced Edition. They did a great job as far as remastering Shadow Man. Still haven't bought that. Overall, though, these are notable old games that all seem like, a lot of them seem like they should have been owned by other companies and re-released by other companies. And yet, weirdly, weren't. Yet, here's the System Shock Enhanced Edition, which I do own. It is, if anything, crazy that so many of these games were under the banner of I haven't played any of these Tex Murphy games. I was planning on covering them. I also was planning on covering these humongous games. It is really just crazy to have so many old games under the banner of this publisher, and all these old games being proven hits. For the most part, all they have to do is make sure they're playable, which, if anything, that I think just highlights that so many other game developers and big companies that own the rights to old games are dropping the ball by effectively not re-releasing or remastering their old IPs. Major Nelson, or formerly known as Major Nelson, Larry Herb, has updated his headline here. No longer is there a moon visible, so maybe the idea that he might be working for DreamWorks, which was my speculation based on just seeing a moon in the banner, was wrong. Maybe he is posting a banner of the sky from like his house to just do something cool, or maybe he's working for a company that is all about the sky in some way. Like, if he was the new person in charge of SpaceX, for instance, that would be interesting, to say the least. But he has mostly stopped responding or tweeting to anything video game related. Instead, we have an actor here that died, where he's just saying rest in peace. And yeah, I guess he retweeted this message of getting Discord on Xbox. Then he also weirdly is just promoting Vices. Pee Wee Herman, or more accurately Paul Rubens, who played the character Pee Wee Herman on top of playing maybe a couple other characters, died after secretly having cancer, not telling anybody for I think 6 years. He's been fighting cancer. He's 70 years old, so he's pretty old. Noticeably, though, Pee Wee Herman as a comedian, as an actor, should have been way more popular, and if anything, he was the victim of cancel culture far before cancel culture even happened. He was arrested in a sting for being in a porno theater, which that story has been misreported that he was like masturbating in the porno theater, which he claimed at least he wasn't actually doing. He wasn't doing anything. He was just in the porno theater, and the cops arrested him, probably because he was a celebrity. In general, in New York, where I think it happened, being in a porno theater and jerking off is not really even that discouraged. Like, it's kind of just expected. Those are very different kinds of theaters. And yeah, but he was already hired as playing Pee Wee Herman, so it definitely did not look good, and definitely people made a lot of jokes, and it ruined his cartoon, or not cartoon, but his kids show as a thing, and it mostly ruined his career overall. Whereas he really should have done a lot more character acting and a lot more comedic acting. He should have had at least more stand-up sets as a comedian. And so it's really a sad statement that he's known for doing way less than he really should have been allowed to do. Whereas that kind of cancel culture didn't stick as much with other comedians later. I'm trying to think particularly who I'm thinking about. I can't think of the guy's name, but he had a TV show, and yeah, then he got similar incident happened, got canceled, and then a year later just did a stand-up set at like Madison Square Gardens, and it worked just as well, and he's just doing stand-up comedy. And maybe Paul Reubens was doing a little bit more stand-up comedy than I know of, but like Louis, not Louis Anderson, but the comedian's name is Louis something, I think. How that connects to video games is fairly nebulous if this will load. But there was a brief moment there. This is so stupid, the way Twitter is now working. It's just like, I'm not going to let you through until you see the X, then I'm going to try and load something, and then in this case it's almost certainly going to fail. There was a very brief You Don't Know Jack TV series on, I think, ABC, which was perhaps too offensive a name for a show, and too silly of a game show to actually succeed, because it was like you were being asked questions and then they would try and distract you, or they'd ask incredibly difficult questions you had no chance of knowing the answer. So it was just like making fun of the contestants while the contestants seemingly were trying to actually make actual money on the game show. Well, Paul Reubens, this image is not really loading in, played the titular character, I believe, Jack. Or maybe he wasn't actually playing as a character named Jack. Noticeably, the Jack in the You Don't Know Jack games has always been this like bald-headed character, whereas he just had this terrible haircut. But Paul Reubens again was playing another character as the host of You Don't Know Jack. So that's your video game connection to it, very little. And I would say in my mind, I do kind of feel like I would easily confuse the Paul Reubens with some other actor, that the other comedian that I think he also got into a small bit of trouble, but nowhere as much later on. There were two weird comedic actors that were making kids. One was making Pee Wee Herman TV show, the other one was making movies. Ernest Scared Stupid. Yeah. Ernest Goes to Camp. Yeah. And in my mind, those two characters are easily merged into one actor when it is a different actor overall. It is two different actors, but we definitely had enough of a idea here where kids' entertainment included very weird improv actors or comedic actors playing a character, where you mostly don't get that now. Jiminy Glick maybe was a character a little bit later, but yeah, we transitioned over the decades from somebody like Bozo the Clown, who was playing a character in a clown outfit, to Pee Wee Herman, who was playing a clown not in a clown outfit, or Ernest playing a clown not in a clown outfit, to eventually transitioning to not having comedic actors at all. Best case scenario, you have people that are like Steve from Blue's Clues for very young shows, but mostly you just don't have an adult actor show up at all, and you mostly just don't have live action shows at all. I need to move really fast now, so let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles. Banjo-Kazooie's Fable Stop and Swoop feature has finally been managed on an original Nintendo 64 hardware. The gimmick used a cartridge swapping to unlock new content, but was scrapped. Never even heard of this. You'd have to quickly swap the cartridge out, which almost certainly would break something or crash the game. The idea is players would reach a point in the rare game, then turn the console off, quickly swap the game out for a different rare game, then turn the console back on. If performed correctly, the stored memory would be detected by the second cartridge and would unlock new content. I guess I get the idea of what they're trying to do there, but wouldn't it just make more sense to, in the Nintendo 64 era, have a save file on the save cartridges that would plug into the back of the Nintendo 64 cartridges, controllers, and just detect the save file from a different game? Then you would just have to swap out a save cartridge, but probably not even do that much. Like, if you weren't talking Nintendo 64, if you're talking Super NES or NES, it makes a lot more sense that you might do something like that, but it's a dumb idea overall. And apparently it's something that never was really implemented and seemingly has only been done in virtual scenarios and not done with actual hardware. Although it also definitely feels like this it just seems like that's not very relevant as a concept. Apparently Call of Duty's Twitter account pokes fun at Modern Warfare 3 art leaks, which the fact that we're still talking about Twitter, I guess, means it's still relevant at the moment. We don't care about Video Games Chronicles podcast. Oh, I don't care about it. 2 hours of Assassin's Creed Jade footage is leaked online. Hideo Kojima explains why he rewrote Death Stranding 2 from scratch after the pandemic. The game story had been written until COVID-19 changed everything. In general, I would say Death Stranding 1 kind of works around the idea of a virus, so I wouldn't be surprised if the story of Death Stranding 2 also centered around a type of virus. After experiencing the pandemic, I just rewrote the whole story from scratch. I also didn't want to predict any more future, so I rewrote it. If anything, if he's really afraid that Death Stranding 1 predicted the COVID-19 pandemic, coincidentally, and he rewrote it, that really implies that Death Stranding 2 story is going to probably be very positive, which that could work. It may not work. I don't think Kojima really is the best writer to tell positive stories, and video games really aren't the best format to tell positive stories. There is some positivity, obviously, in Metal Gear Solid 5, as far as trying to get all players around the world to destroy the nukes in their individual games, but the majority of Metal Gear Solid 5 is still a stealth fighting violent game. On one hand, you could easily dismiss this too as just Kojima once again trying to get some news press, and Video Games Chronicle being more than willing to give him some press coverage, and other people more than willing to give him press coverage. Whereas notably also he was not at the Game Awards this year, which his absence was noticed, certainly, that he didn't have anything to say or anything to show, and he wasn't just in the seats as far as I saw, saying hi. It would have made a lot of sense to bring him up on stage and just say, hey, do you have anything new to announce at this time? And he goes, nope, and then walks off. That would be a funny little bit to do at the very beginning of the presentation. Apparently Apex Legends Season 18 Revenant changes detailed, and launch date has been confirmed. Do we have an actual launch date? August 8th. A Quake 2 remaster will be announced at QuakeCon, it's being claimed. Which, okay. Like, it definitely makes sense to remake things. And Quake 2 probably would be played by a decent number of people, and I imagine people have nostalgia for it. I never really played the Quake series of games, or most first-person shooter games I didn't play, or rocket jump things. We already talked about a potential Lego Harry Potter game. I would be more excited to see a Lego Harry Potter game that tried to go further past the points of the books with Harry Potter, or tried to be a Lego Hogwarts game instead of Harry Potter. In general, I think they should be focusing around Hogwarts or the magical world of Harry Potter in general, which, if that's what you have to call it, the magical world of Harry Potter, fine, but have Harry Potter be more of a legend and not the main protagonist, and not telling these same stories over and over again. It would be the direction I'd like to see the games go and stories go. We talked about the Lego Animal Crossing sets potentially happening. Baldur's Gate 3 being the second biggest Steam launch so far, with the first biggest being what? I wonder. Hogwarts Legacy. Which definitely that highlights how the playfield is really changing around video games too, that we're getting Baldur's Gate and Hogwarts Legacy as big giant games, and we're not seeing Modern Warfare games being the biggest thing, or Counter-Strike Go being the biggest thing on their launch days. Or the gamer bros that want to play military first-person shooters are, I think, getting burned out and getting older and just moving on. And frankly, I never really thought that they were as big as I think Xbox thought they would be, or Xbox wanted them to be. And take note, if Microsoft had a super successful solitaire card game, they would do everything in their power to promote the idea that there's a ton of people playing solitaire card games, and that there's a whole community of new games out there, new gamers out there that want to play solitaire card games. And that's exactly what they did with Halo. Is that Halo was selling, Halo was something Microsoft made, therefore Microsoft promoted the idea that gamers existed in larger numbers than they ever probably did that wanted to play Halo, and that they effectively single-handedly created the gamer bro stereotype and idea. We talked about before that the Elden Ring and Bloodborne composer Yuka Kitamura has left From Software. How important is the music in Elden Ring or Bloodborne? It's probably pretty good music, but I imagine they could find somebody to replace her. I don't think people would stop playing Dark Souls like games just because the composer leaves. Now, if the composer leaves and the writer leaves and the game programmers leave, and then there's just nobody from the original teams left, and the games get worse because of it, then I imagine people would stop playing Dark Souls style games. And I think it's pretty easy to make a bad Dark Souls type game that would just be very frustrating and difficult. Apparently, Baldur's Gate 3 has a save prevention bug. Larian has provided several solutions. You turn off Cloud Sync, you remove this folder, then you start the game, and you do not enable Cloud Sync. Is, I guess, one of the solutions they're suggesting. That's something I definitely hate about video games, particularly when I'm playing a game that's 6 months to several years old and it's still having problems and bugs. In the case of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, multiplayer just being disabled in general because of the breakup with Square Enix, I don't think that is really the kind of bug you would ever expect to see, but I'd still call it a bug as far as my concern about wanting to play multiplayer, if I did want to play multiplayer, which I wouldn't have anyways, but that's annoying. But then there's also just visual glitches all throughout Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and things they never even started to try to fix, like her hair clipping through the equipment on her back, the grapple hook falling down and not staying attached to the spot it's supposed to be attached to, so you're just floating in the air. Weird visual glitches in some cutscenes right up to the end. Lighting problems of just poor optimization as far as the ray tracing, and having really, really dark sections in many places in the game. Audio cutting out in several spots. It's a very, very buggy game for a AAA game. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is. And it's somewhat deceptively advertised. It's only a slight spoiler to say there's a trailer showing fighting people during an eclipse. That is the final boss fight, which feels nothing like the rest of the game. It takes maybe 5 minutes that you see the eclipse, and that's it. I've thought the entire final act for several hours was going to have the eclipse happening, and that was going to drastically change the appearance of everything in the game and show off ray tracing. The game tries to sell itself, when it came out, it tried to sell itself about using ray tracing, and visually it looks awful. The ray tracing does not help it at all. It should have just been completely eliminated in favor of just light mapping every area and doing it the old-fashioned way, where you can control the way things look and make it look a lot better. Moving on. It's been confirmed that a Pokemon Presents livestream is coming next week. August 8th, 2 p.m. UK time. So we'll probably get some new announcements around Pokemon, or just more talking about like Pokemon Sleep. I did see an article where they were talking about how they had to make Pokemon Sleep less interesting as a game, otherwise people wouldn't actually sleep, and that would defeat the whole purpose of it being a sleep tracking app with some gamification in it. But yeah, I have not heard anybody actually testing the Pokemon Sleep app, and I haven't heard anybody singing its praises. I wouldn't be surprised if we also just get maybe some Pokemon Go announcements. Of course, they could also just be teasing the next Pokemon game or a Pokemon movie. It may be the Pokemon anime new series. That's very close. Let's see. Moving on, the Nissan GTR from Gran Turismo movie is being added to GT7. I guess this Gran Turismo movie is either coming out or is already out. I haven't really heard anything about the movie though lately. It really did just look like it was a race car movie that mentions Gran Turismo video game, and that's it at the beginning. We already had talked about in the previous stream a special director's cut of Vampire Survivors potentially existing. We talked about Kickstarter saying projects will have to disclose AI use. Zelda has driven record quarter sales for the Switch to 18.5 million. Twitch has said promotion or sponsorships of CSGO gambling during streams is now prohibited. Around 75% of top CSGO streamers are sponsored by skin gambling websites, according to Video Games Chronicle. Although, notice how you're lying with statistics potentially here. Around is not exactly 75% of the top CSGO streamers. What makes you a top CSGO streamer? What list, what chart on Twitch are they using to determine that? And there's probably really no determination to get to 75%. This is very much just somebody looked at some chart and guessed. But I wouldn't say it's the worst estimate either. Like, I think there is a significant number of legitimate CSGO streamers that can only make money if they are sponsored by some skin gambling site. And there is probably a large percentage of people that don't care actually about being CSGO streamers and they're just trying to make money in general. Let's see. Apparently the Japanese studio Kimco is selling all 50 of its Xbox RPGs in a huge $200 bundle. The limited time bundle offers a saving of over $500. That being said, you really would have to want to play those games because that is just a lot of money. And it seems like you probably would own some of these games before and not get that full savings if you were a fan. Scrolling down this list of RPG games, these mostly look like just generic RPG names. I don't recognize a single game listed here. This is hardly Final Fantasy or anything like that. So really, this wouldn't even be the biggest bundle of potential bundles that you could find on Steam. Yeah. And in particular, I guess you are buying this from the Xbox Microsoft Store for Xbox games. I wouldn't be surprised if this is Kimco desperate for money or Kimco about to go out of business. But yeah, probably one of the most easily skippable bundles or offers you would be given as far as video games. And then Ratatan is coming to consoles after clearing a Kickstarter stretch goal. I think we had already talked about that before too. So that brings us to the Gamatsu articles. Onion Games trademarking Stray Children in Japan. I think we had already talked about that. There's not a lot of information there. Radiant Silvergun is coming to PC on August 18th. Let's see if that is on the follow list. I did kind of back away from the I kind of backed away from having my network settings as strict as it was, but I am still very much feeling like these pages are just not loading as fast as I'd like. But maybe that is just the RAM in general, with the RAM being overclocked but not overclocked to the max. Maybe it does just take that much longer for a page to load. Honestly though, I think it is probably just my internet service provider. Moving on, Powerful Pro Baseball Inkin 9 Crossroads launches September 20th for iOS and Android in Japan and later for the PS4 and Switch. Capcom Platinum title sales updates as of June 30 on Gamatsu. Here they have several big number sellings, although it's not really in a chronological order. Street Fighter 6 1.9 million. Overall, Resident Evil 4 Remake 4.9 million, which is like not really comparing apples to apples because Street Fighter 6 came out later. There was a YouTuber who went on a rant against another like Kotaku article trying to say Street Fighter 6 is sexist, and this YouTuber I was listening to is basically all about Street Fighter. That's almost his entire channel, and he was definitely not happy on the idea of trying to do like a cancel culture on Street Fighter 6 because I guess Chun-Li's Chinese dress shows too much skin, and it arguably started to devolve into just an anti-feminism rant, which, yeah, there are definitely some feminists that make feminism look bad, and a lot of them seem to work at clickbait article writing websites, particularly around video games. Moving on, Switch worldwide sales top 129.53 million. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom tops 18.51 million. Which there's some other numbers on Gematsu if you want to check that out. Taiko no Tatsujin Rhythm Concert has been announced for iOS and Android. I suspect, though, that you have a decent chance of this drumming game, tap on the beat game, not coming to the West. Although some Taiko no Tatsujin games have come to the West in the past, and it would be very easy for it to be ported. They're releasing it in Thailand with English. They're releasing it in Hong Kong, Indonesia, Macau, Thailand with English, Japanese, and traditional Chinese language support. So it would only be a little bit more work to release it to the rest of the English-speaking world. And there might actually be a mobile game here worth playing. Because if you have rhythm, if you like the idea of drumming mini games, then you might have something that rather works. It looks to me like there's a left side and a right side, and there might be a hold versus a tap, but I've seen other rhythm games require a lot more interaction and a lot more button presses and movements. It's going to have over 600 songs free with ads. Play over 600 songs for free. So, over 600 with ads is what they're trying to say here. That might be part of the problem, though, is that why this wouldn't come to the West is that they just wouldn't want to have to renegotiate the music rights for the rest of the world outside of Asia for 600 songs. Let's see. Moving on, a game called Inescapable No Rules, No Rescue launches October 19th. Survive your tropical island resort stay and win $500,000. This is basically a Danganronpa clone game that we've already kind of had our eyes on. Although it does seem like it might play a little bit differently, and it is not going as much with the Japanese characters, I think, as Danganronpa went. This feels more like it's a random assortment of characters in a Japanese anime style from around the world. Whereas in Danganronpa, all the students were basically the same age and were basically Japanese. Guess we have it now. Now we have the release date, though. The Famitsu sales from the 24th to the 30th have been updated. Let's see what's new. We've got Natsurumon 20th Century Vacation selling particularly well. Nowhere well as Pikmin 4, which sold just insane amounts, 100,000 in 1 week versus 18,000 But yeah, Natsumon, which is what this is a picture of, apparently rather popular in Japan, more than I thought it was. Crymachinia selling only 7,000, making the 6th spot, and Disney Illusion Island selling even less, making the 7th spot, and then Crymachinia getting some more sales for the PS5 version versus the Nintendo Switch version, which puts one game in the top 10 for PlayStation 5. Origami 123 pack selling particularly low in the 17th spot, and then Crymachinia for the PS4 selling particularly low. Vast majority of games still Nintendo Switch games, which if a new Nintendo console comes out in Japan in particular, I think that's going to work very well in Nintendo's favor as soon as people are potentially buying even more Switch games if it has backward compatibility, or even rebuying old Switch games because they are not backwards compatible. The hardware sales still going fairly well for the PlayStation 5 now that it's finally available, and about 3 times as many Xbox Series X sales this week. This looks like a pretty decent week as far as software sales, which anytime there seems like there's more new games coming out, that pushes hardware sales to sell more in Japan. Gothic Classic is coming to the Switch on September 28th. Hellfire, Flying Shark, Fire Shark, and Slap Fight are coming to PC on August 24th. Which I guess that means 4 separate Steam pages, all being mentioned during a single press release. And yeah, I really am just being so generous by saying anything that puts out a press release deserves a YouTube short. Generally, I would say no to any of these shoot 'em ups. These aren't ones that I recognize, but it would be very, very easy for me not to recognize rather historically relevant shoot 'em up games, because that's just not my style of gameplay, and it never was. A game called Somerville is coming to PS4 and PS5 on August 31st. It's already available on Steam, so let's see what this looks like. Looks like it's kind of a nicely visual polished walking simulator, from as far as I can tell. I'm not really seeing a heads-up display or any indication of any game. Regardless, though, I can see it's mixed reviewed, so this does feel like one of those games that is just trying to be trying to get some more sales by going to a new platform. Too long didn't read. The movement is frustrating. The puzzles are not really even puzzles. As great as the art style is, the game has very few moments that allow it to shine. And yeah, I'll believe that. Lost Eidolons for PS5 and Xbox Series launches August 24th, which, yeah, that is on Steam. Also, is this a game I've already rejected? No, it really just looks like a game I haven't been paying much attention to. Well, in this case, it is one of these strategy RPG games, and I am not anywhere close to wanting to play strategy RPG games, but I'll make a YouTube short around it, and hope I haven't already done that. Same thing already once. Virgo versus the Zodiac is coming to the PS4, Xbox One, and Series and Switch on August 23rd, which was released in 2019. Yeah, just even on Steam, you can see that pages are taking longer to load up. This is a game that's already on my wish list, so it obviously was very positively received. So it being released to new consoles makes a little bit more sense. Guilty Gear Strive topping 2.5 million players, we've talked about. Sambo de Amigo Party Central Characters trailer is available if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Persona 5 Tacticia has its second trailer if you want to look at that. We talked about Raincode shipments and digital sales topping 300,000. Remember, digital sales and shipments really shouldn't be combined as one metric, but they are definitely becoming combined more and more often. Ray Z's Arcade Chronology is coming to PC this fall, which, yeah, definitely feels like almost every shoot 'em up game is getting re-released. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have one day in which I just make a whole bunch of YouTube shorts around shoot 'em up style games, and hopefully that doesn't cause anybody to unsubscribe. Let's see. The first Descendant crossplay open beta test has been delayed to September 19th, from September 19th to the 25th. Well, no, it's been delayed to the 19th through the 25th. They've written that, I think, very poorly. Pokemon Presents, being set for August 8th, is going to be featuring 35 minutes of news and updates. The official word is, I guess. We talked about Genshin Impact 4.0. Project L, whatever that is, has added a character named Yasuo, which Project L is, I guess, a free-to-play fighting game based on League of Legends, and Yasuo then must be a free-to-play fighter. Devolver Delayed Showcase 23 to 24 has been set for August 7th. It's going to apparently celebrate games delayed into 2024, which I don't really believe that Devolver Digital has reason anymore to continue to do these silly kind of presentations. But at the very least, if they're going to parody something, they should parody something that actually exists. So them having a showcase of games that either they're going to publish that have been delayed, or if they were going to actually highlight other people's games that have been delayed, that would be kind of funny, but probably also insulting to some people. This is going to be apparently only 3 minutes long as a presentation, which in 3 minutes you could probably say nothing has been delayed at all from Devolver Digital, and that could be the joke. Or you are literally talking about one, maybe two things being delayed. Persona 5 Tacticia has details for a lot more of the game there. All the Persona characters being in fancy kimono style traditional Japanese dress and being drawn in this shorter, I would say this is probably moe style more than kawaii style. If anything, it's half moe, half chibi style, because they're even smaller than that. The animation style for these Persona characters, though, I just don't think works particularly well when you've already established the Persona characters to look one way, and Persona games are not so saturated that it would justify making a parody version in which they're being depicted. If anything, this animation style feels like it exists solely so you don't confuse any of the cutscenes from this game as being canon for the actual Persona series. And I think we probably are hitting a point with Persona where we're being oversaturated with low quality Persona spin-offs or Persona advertisements and promotions, when what people really would want is a very high quality Persona 6, or which I think would be the next numbered game. And I don't think that they're potentially, with a strategy game, buying themselves a lot of favor or a lot of time if they're struggling to make a Persona 6, which maybe they are, maybe they aren't. There's just a ton of screenshots here, which I think highlights my point here. Is just, it's too much. It's too much promotion for a side game for the Persona series. If you love the Persona characters, then you probably are already on board with this. If you don't know anything about the Persona series, you wouldn't want to play Persona 5 Tactician, and shouldn't play it. Moving on, a Sifu final update launches September 7th for the PS4 and PS5 and the Xbox One series and PC. Later on, it's coming to the Switch, which I guess the question to ask there is, Sifu popular? And I guess the answer to that is yes. So this is coming in September. By the time this YouTube short was made and published, September would be around the corner. So I'll make another YouTube short because the final update is available. It would be nice if I could make a YouTube short specifically on this news of the final update, but I would have to redo my whole programming to make the YouTube shorts automatically if I was going to do that. Noticeably, I've not put any thought or interest in actually making YouTube shorts that aren't being automatically made by my programs. If I had to put any extra time in YouTube shorts, I wouldn't be doing them at all. And then our final Gematsu article, Under Night in Birth 2, Sis Sellers has been announced for PS4 and PS5, Switch and PC. This is another fighting game, I imagine. I guess this is possibly part of the Fate Stay Night series, but maybe not. It may just be part of the Night series and not the Fate Stay or Fate series. Like, looking at these characters, I'm not really recognizing any of them, so I can't really say anything more about it. We'll hopefully get more details when they actually have a Steam page. Right, and then that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com. We've already talked about the Mario movie. Let's see. Roblox's MetaQuest beta hit it over 1 million downloads in a week, which I didn't know Roblox was having a beta to be on the MetaQuest. If anything, Roblox might be the game to get people to buy the MetaQuest 2. Which I don't think is particularly that expensive out of a VR or augmented reality headset. I think it's VR. Capcom's Okami franchise hit 4 million in sales, which is interesting and almost certainly would have been a long journey to get there. Because, yeah, they haven't re-released Okami in a while. Like, let's see, Okami re-releases for the 2-game series is reaching this milestone. I didn't even know there was an Okami 2. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some investigation there. But yeah, hitting that number the hard way, certainly, by not releasing any new content, just re-releasing the old game. We already talked about Twitch's new policy. We already talked about GameStop abandoning crypto and NFT. We talked about Baldur's Gate. Guilty Gear Strive fought its way to 2.5 million players. It definitely feels like the fighting game competition is heating up at the moment. it probably is more of a case that more fighting game tournaments and such happen in the summer. So we may not be too far away from Evo, and I wouldn't be surprised if all fighting games get new versions right about now or a month ago from now, a month previous from now. And that's why we're seeing both Street Fighter 6 and Fighting Gear and several other fighting games being talked about. Apparently, Unity's Q2 earnings show significant growth from 2022. The engine maker's monetization-focused growth solutions division did better than expected, with revenue growth of nearly 160% compared to 2022's second quarter. No. There's, I don't think, a lot of love for Unity at the moment, and not a lot of talk about Unity in general. But Unity has been trying to make more money, and they succeeded in being able to make more money and show it to the shareholders, assuming they're actually reporting the accounting correctly, which is perhaps a big assumption for any company. But yeah, I don't think too much would happen to get rid of Unity or see Unity knocked from the second spot as an engine, unless there was just a new competitor that came out of the blue and was very quickly adopted, and I just don't see that happening. Unreal Engine would definitely be my default recommendation for almost any game developer. When you have Lego games being made out of Unreal Engine instead of Unity, that says a lot. There are some internal engines that if you work at Capcom, you'd probably use the Resident Evil engine, the RE engine. But if you're not working at Capcom, you wouldn't be able to use that. I can see Microsoft or Google coming out with an engine. I can see Microsoft, Google, and Apple all working together to create an engine. I could see some kind of Linux-based open source engine if it got a major overhaul in the programming or just a lot of support coming out of the blue. But mostly you're going to stick to Unity or Unreal because those game engines can port to Nintendo Switch and Xboxes and PlayStations. Anything else, it's going to be a question mark as far as how well that can be ported to other consoles. Moving on, let's do the Steam fall list cleanup. We've got our auto blur enabled now. We have a mixed game here called Immortal Seeker, which we can remove. We have a VR game that is living with an intellectual disability, which I guess is an interesting idea, certainly, to have the VR experience of somebody with an inability to read, a dyslexia that's really bad, and maybe visual interpretation problems. Although, honestly, while this might be kind-hearted, I don't know if you really should charge any money for something that's perhaps more supposed to give people the experience. I don't know if something like this should be in VR in the first place, because if you have an intellectual disability, you probably shouldn't be wearing VR in the first place, or at least you should ask a doctor first. And yeah, I think a story like this was probably better shown as linear video, not interactive video game. But also it's just not relevant, so we'll say no to that. We have Imago Beyond Nightmares, which, while positive at 90%, really isn't interesting me much. Yeah, increasingly there is not much of a line between potentially getting 20 of your friends to rate something positively and having them buy your game, and getting 30 people to positively review a game that, with at least 10 of them not being your friends. Ilium doesn't look like anything. Open world game in ancient Babylon. I guess you're supposed to just run around and break things. Kind of like a temper tantrum type game, which in ancient Babylon I wouldn't be particularly interested in running around breaking things. I'd be more interested in running around an office, breaking an office, or a modern city. Here we have the Sistine Chapel ceiling in VR, which is free, which at a certain level, why not just add it to the library? And then remove it from the following list. Yeah, increasingly I want to start adding more things to the library, even if they're VR games. That way the price doesn't get changed. This iGuide Gnosis VR is not relevant, so it goes away. And then Ignited Steel Prologue. Looks like it's a strategy RPG game, so I think I'm going to say no to this. Plus it's a prologue, so I don't know if there is an actual Ignited Steel that was ever made. But yeah, I have a fear that games will either disappear, even VR games, and it certainly would clean up the fall list more. Igni Stone isn't out yet, so we'll give it more time. If Fusion were that easy, doesn't have but 3 reviewers. This might be a game I would make an exception for, so I'll give it some more time, because it looks like it's a comedic point and click game, and I guess I am just always looking for comedic point and click games. This next game looks like it has adult content, but it's not in the adult section. It's called Idle Days. It's rated very positively as a visual novel looking game. It doesn't have a uncensored patch or anything, though. In general, most of these pictures are pretty family friendly, and I guess I just don't really want to play a visual novel where you're a delinquent gets transformed into an idol. If anything, this is the kind of thing that would be more interesting as a manga or anime. I wonder if some of these visual novels are straight up just pitches to make a manga or anime. The animation here is fine overall, but there just isn't going to be enough gameplay to justify $12.99. So we'll say no to that. And then our last game, as far as the fall list cleanup is concerned, is Idol Showdown, which has anime. I guess it is anime. In this animation, idol girls fighting each other, it looks like. Very positively, the game is free. Again, I guess if something is free and it's rated very positively, just add it to the library. More and more, if I'm going to build up my collection of video games, I am going to have to start selecting more and more free games anyways. my budget is blown for probably the rest of this year, if not next year. I've got some surprises that have happened recently, and frankly it feels like there's a new surprise every single day, and it really sucks. Which, yeah, it would be very helpful if people donated to my Patreon, but also I understand people are broke as I am, so whatever. Let's go through all the new games on Steam now. Let's see. Try and burn through these fairly quickly. This whole week has been just 4-hour streams. Dragon Dodge Valley is nothing. I think we can say Tiles 2 is also nothing. Free. The Lazy Dogs is nothing. Let's just go silent and save myself some breath until we find something worth mentioning. Here we have White Album Memories Falling Like Snow, which I've already put on the fall list. In a lot of ways, we are kind of going in circles here, where here's some anime pop idols in a visual novel being allowed on the fall list when I just took something off the fall list. Sliding Rails. Looks like garbage. We have our first adult game, The Witch Knight Anna, the Black Serpent, and the Golden Wind. That is a heck of a title. It's claiming a lot of visuals, but overall it looks like a visual novel with just a bunch of big-breasted 2D anime colorful characters, although I really wouldn't even call them anime. I have no idea what kind of actual game it is, though. It looks to me just like a visual novel with maybe branching paths. It's really advertising itself with the 400 visuals. Apparently there's a Futanari in it, Dick Girl. It's $6.99. It says it has Japanese full audio and English subtitles. Seems to be very focused around the Futanari. Characters. So yeah, overall the game is just doing a really poor job of selling itself. And weirdly, even though it is in the adult section, none of the screenshots are actually showing any actual skin. Like, I can just straight up show you this as far as like a picture, and if anything, that's the nicest picture they have as far as the screenshots. Next we have something called My First Craft Survival, which I assume means that the creator of this game made their first asset flip craft survival game. Although the character also seems like they're kind of a young girl crafting and surviving in a very ugly looking world in game, selling it as early access. Next we have a game called Service Blade, which might actually be something, so I'll give that a chance. There's that game Corvus, and that came out and I totally forgot it even had come out as a game. Like, so I was actually fairly shocked. This next game is called Love and War Hero by Chance 2, and this is once again, we've just seen a massive increase of games that feel like they should be in the adult section and they aren't. This is a English and Chinese game with an 18 plus uncensored patch for free, and I guess it's fine if that's how Valve really wants to run their store, but it kind of feels like, particularly in this case, a game like this really is only selling itself by being adult. It looks like one of those awful mobile games with just way too many buttons and way too many currencies. Has a bunch of characters, obviously, and then it's going to have sequences like this where you'll see them undressed, I'm sure, if you install the patch. And that's probably the only nudity you really see in the entire game. It's not a good game by any means, but it is, once again, one of those weirdly not in the adult section. And this may be more of a case where Chinese companies have all got together and said, let's dump all the adult games at once. Or maybe this is just the... Well, one story I haven't really talked about is China has announced even more restrictions on the number of hours of that kids can play. It's ridiculously low at this point. I think for young kids it's like 3 minutes a week of being online, and in general it's a restriction on online activity, not just video games, playing video games online. Basically China is trying to make it impossible for kids to be online at all, or to be able to define any kid that is a child of a dissident or that is a dissident themselves to be defined as a video game addict, so they can be sent off to a re-education camp for gaming addiction as the excuse. But yeah, with those extra restrictions by the Chinese government, maybe this is Chinese game developers just shoving out as much content as they possibly can have. Otherwise, this just does look like one of these low-effort RPG Maker games with characters way too big breasts. You do get into a weird question. If in the real world somebody had giant double G breasts, but they were appropriately covered and clothed, is that at some point not family friendly or appropriate to be in front of kids? Particularly, I'm talking like if you've gone through extensive plastic surgery and it's obvious you've gone through extensive plastic surgery to have giant breasts. I think as long as you're appropriately clothed, though, the right answer probably is to say they're still family friendly as long as they're covered up, regardless of how big the breasts are. I think personally I'd say even a decent amount of cleavage is probably still family friendly, as long as you're not straight up just topless. It comes, I guess, back down to the two-piece bikini. As long as you're wearing the top of a two-piece bikini, you're probably family friendly in most people's minds, regardless of how small the triangles on the top of the two-piece bikini might actually be. They can get ridiculously small, certainly. If you're just barely covering a nipple with the top, that may be too much, too small of a bikini, but yeah, they can get pretty small as far as the micro bikini style, at least as depicted in fiction. I don't know if I've actually seen anybody in the real world wearing ridiculously small micro bikinis versus just going straight topless. And I guess at a certain level you get into that point as far as what's family friendly, which is somewhat video game and YouTube, somewhat YouTube related. Otherwise I am just rambling. That a lot of people would say, if you're at a beach and someone goes topless at a topless beach where toplessness is allowed, that still would be considered an appropriate scenario in family friendliness. And certainly a mom bathing a child and them both bathing together is not considered inappropriate. So yeah, I guess size alone really wouldn't be a determining factor, even if the size was ridiculous. Well, pretty obviously I'm not focusing much here. I'm gonna give this a YouTube short. It may be nothing. Jurassic Dragon in the Binary Relic. Looks like nothing. Symbios. Looks like a visual novel of a different art style. But this pencil sketch art style isn't really grabbing my attention. And in general, you know, I just have to really admit I'm not interested in visual novels. But you know what? This may be something for somebody else, so I'll make a YouTube short around it. Go Home, I assume, is a clone of Go Up. Just another one of these low effort asset flip, jump higher and higher games. Although maybe in this case it's more jumping horizontally instead of jumping vertically, which that might improve the experience somewhat as far as the way you look. Mostly though, if you're jumping, you're going to be mostly looking forward and down. So there being something below you other than just random water would make it visually look a little bit better. But yeah, I have no reason to say anything or make a short around that. We have yet another adult game this Friday. There's been a lot of adult games this week. This one's called Human Farm Rehabilitation. So it's 2D. I'd say it's slightly more of a Western style depiction of ladies. Speaking of giant breasts, these are giant breasts going into the human cow fetish. Weirdly, it seems like it also has some RPG Maker elements in it too. Let's see. In a world where human farms are publicly established, a delinquent girl is taken into one farms for human discipline. Will she be able to escape the facility, or will she gradually be trained to turn into a cow or act like a cow? Yep, this is that human cow fetish of ladies with very big breasts and usually are actually lactating and then being hooked up to milking machines and milked. Yep. This is a fetish that I think also works better in cartoon fiction than it does when they actually try to implement it in the real world. But yeah, the art style is very Western and not particularly great. It's $7.64. It's English, Japanese, and Chinese for the language. It says all the characters are over 20 years old. Yep. The human cow ladies have like cow spot bikinis that they're wearing or partially wearing. It says it has 15 basic CGs and 16 erotic scenes and 7 endings. It does feel like the RPG maker of this is somewhat around the idea of escaping, but I don't really feel like it's just a puzzle escape the world game either. I think there's probably some items and collectibles and keys you would have to find. I guess I'll put this on the follow list. I don't know why I'm specifically wanting to follow this, but there hasn't been another example specifically that heavy on a single fetish as far as the adult games. And weirdly, that was in the adult section, so there's just increasing inconsistency as far as what is being allowed on Steam and where it's being allowed to be placed. Steam effectively is a storefront, but it doesn't really have shelves like a real store would, other than what's in the adult section and what isn't. That's your two shelves. As far as the other tags and things, those are all cross-referencing in multiple of different ways. I think we'll say no to Obi here. I think we'll probably say no to Mind Block. Frogs versus Storks. Looks like nothing. Try and just burn through all this quickly. Here we have yet another game that excuse me. Another game that really should be in the adult section but isn't. Glam Descent for $1.39. Bunch of languages being supported. And it is just a Descent simplistic mobile game type low effort game being combined with anime girls in bikinis. Yep, just far too many games like this where there are distinct disconnects. And I could see Valve saying, hey, we're not going to allow your game to just be one style of game that then rewards the player with still images of a lewd nature. Like, that's probably the way you would want to describe it, to say, hey, that concept is not the kind of game we want. We want good quality gameplay mechanics first and foremost. And so perhaps you don't even mention the lewd nature. Perhaps you just have a rule of a game that visually appears to have a poor quality gameplay or poor gameplay visuals, or games that feel like they are bait and switchy in that there are very high quality still images but then very poor quality gameplay interaction issues. Although certainly if Valve was going to implement that rule, the first thing they should do is implement a rule against games that have just no gameplay at all, and that would ruin Valve effectively, because then visual novels would all be not allowed on Steam, and about a third, I imagine, of all Valve's profit is from visual novels. I'm going to say no to Leap from Hell. Here we have yet another Avery Fly Around Games. Yep. And then we have another game called Greenland that I don't think really looks great, but it is very positive, so I'm gonna make an exception. And here we have yet another adult game called Beads Popper. There's a character in the middle, and then there's beads falling down from, it looks like, the left side and the right side. Or it may be that they're falling down from the right side and then they curve around and go back up. And so there's this line. I guess this is like that game Zuma, with the difference being that there's these fantasy characters. There's a slime girl, there's a flower girl, there's a succubus girl in the middle. They're saying it's a casual tile matching puzzle game with simple RPG elements. Battle against adorable monster girls by popping colorful beads. While I'm seeing cleavage here, I'm not really seeing a lot of promise for nudity. $3.39. It does have just the word nudity for its adult content. It's English only. So yeah, you move the beads around and you find a combination, and then I guess that's breaking the armor here on the sides, and eventually the armor will completely come off, and then this slime girl would be nude. Okay. It's a simplistic game. There's only 6 animated opponents in it. It's $3.39. Weirdly, though, I would say this game, as far as adult games, might work fairly well. It needs way more characters. It's a good concept. It needs more of an animator, more of a character. It feels definitely like a cell phone game, but yeah, it's a simplistic gameplay mechanic for a simplistic payoff of adult content, and it is one hand playable. It seems pretty much. So yeah, I think that probably hits the target audience pretty well. Whereas a lot of these visual novel games with adult content probably go on way too long, or they're way too short for how much you've paid for them. Um, Airborne Sea, again, I guess I'll make an exception, although I really don't even know why I'm putting it on the follow list. CSOL, I assume, is a Counter-Strike Go clone. Again, though, it doesn't look terrible, so do I want to say yes to it? I'm going to put it on the follow list, but I'm not going to make a short on it, specifically because at the very beginning of this trailer, it's just somebody being shot in the head and then being blown up. Yeah. And that just seems like that's perhaps too violent for a YouTube short. Defenders of Legend probably isn't anything. Yep. Shin Galaxy Engage looks like garbage. Red Genie and Idola Tale. This is probably another Chinese game getting pushed out very quickly, although it is only English, so it may just be an English garbage RPG Maker game. Here we have a visual novel called Jaden and Jasmine Lost Memories. Is this supposed to be characters we actually know, Jaden Black or Jasmine Miles? I know there's a Jaden Smith, Will Smith's son, and I know he at one time tried to have a cartoon or anime about him made by Netflix. Well, it's a visual novel, and it's a visual novel starring black people, so that in itself is fairly unique. So I'll give that a YouTube short for just that reason alone. Mixing Amos doesn't look like anything. Here we have yet another adult game. They aren't really being bundled much today either. It's not like all the adult games are in one large group. This one's called Sexual Superhero. It looks like it might be a girl character that you play as, but it might be a boy character. It's kind of hard to tell. And he's running around what looks like a lot like a Chinese MMO MOBA, shooting magic from his hands and flying. And then there's just a lot of screenshots of 2D, looks like they are actually moving around, animated sex scenes where the heads are cut off of all the characters, so the scenes could have been added to basically any game at all. It's selling for $9.99. It says it's English, Spain, Spanish, Simplified Chinese, and Japanese. It's saying that the adult animations are created with stylized 3D models. I really don't feel like that is really what they're showing in the screenshots, though. Like it is much closer to a 2D style, or at best you'd say 2.5D style, than well, it's definitely not a CGI style. Maybe it is more 3D, but it's not CGI looking. But yeah, once again, you have an adult game where the adult content is just completely disconnected, looks completely different from what the rest of the game looks like. Moving on, we have Nightmare Manor, which looks just like an asset flip horror game. Which, yeah, I think people, streamers in particular, have finally gotten away from the idea of playing these horror games for cheap views. And so horror games have fallen back into being fairly irrelevant, and good riddance, frankly, because there was way too many garbage horror games being released on Steam. I don't think I see anything interesting as far as Super Space Club is concerned. It, with a little bit more polish, may have made it. You know what? I'll make an exception on it. Make a short on that. Police Escape, Car Escape Simulator, which, yeah, there's really no way you're going to escape the police if they're chasing you in cars. No reason to even try. Like, I would imagine if you were trying to run away from the police, which is not recommended because they'll shoot you in the back, your best bet would be to shift forms of movement. And so if you're in a car, jump out of the car and run across a field. If you're running across a field and they're chasing you across a field, jump into a car, jump into the boat, jump into the water. I have no idea what this game is. Bit the apple, so what? But I also certainly understand why people run from the cops, even if they're mostly innocent. Cops have established this bad reputation of shooting first and never asking questions. Soulstalker here looks like it has enough visual polish to give it a short. I Am Just a Slime, on the other hand, is going to be a no. Survivor of the Plague doesn't look like anything. Battle X Death looks like garbage. And again, this feels like a Chinese garbage game. Yeah. I bet we see a major increase in Chinese garbage games being released in the next few weeks, and then even months later, eventually, maybe after 6 months to a year, we'll start to see a bit of a die down unless the rules get changed as far as these very stringent limitations on how much kids can play online or be online. I'll give this Splash game a chance. How many more games do we have? Just about 5. Good. So we're not going to go forever. Luckland. Looks like it's a mobile phone slot machine game. Let's see. Refindentio. That's a different name. And visually it looks different enough that it deserves its own spotlight or YouTube short. We have yet another hidden object game to make a YouTube short on. I guess I'm putting out so many YouTube shorts right now too but I'm airing so many of them also that I'm not really getting that far ahead. So far as scheduling them, maybe a little too far ahead. There is definitely room, I imagine, to make less YouTube shorts and make them higher quality if I actually tried to curate some more. But I just don't know if I really want to violate the intention of highlighting new games by all of a sudden trying to do a second pass of curation and determine who deserves more promotion and who doesn't as a news reporter. Like, I should be more flat in my response and not curate that much. I probably shouldn't curate at all, but it's just not reasonable to make a YouTube short for every single game that comes out on Steam when 80% of them are garbage games like Operator Drones here. Let's see, this game Biscuits 5 looks interesting, but if I recall correctly, this is the same game being sold over and over again with this kind of art style. You can see Biscuits 1 came out in 2021 and it has this visual art style similar to Cuphead, but nobody has played their games, and they've just made more and more games that play in slightly different ways with the exact same art style. And it's really a shame because the art style itself doesn't look terrible, but the actual gameplay implementation and the advertising around it is absolutely awful. I guess I'll make an exception here and make a YouTube short on this, but I don't think I'm going to put it on the follow list. That's probably a decision that's more around me seeing if I'll get more views than it is a decision around actually trying to educate people as far as new games actually worth looking at. And Nebula's Descent, I would also say, as a Smash TV clone top-down twin stick shooter, looks like it might be pretty decent too. And that's the end of the show. We had Sniper Ranger early on chatting up a storm on the chat, and then as soon as you left, nobody else chatted. So I guess my question is, if I could do the news stuff earlier, would Sniper Ranger have stayed around more? And the answer is almost certainly no. Sniper Ranger is very much about, personally, is my understanding, very much about wanting to see the Yu-Gi-Oh! Gameplay, not really wanting to see the video game news content. So I'm making a series of live streams here that are not really satisfying a single audience other than myself. It might be better to do all of this work off screen, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, if I'm looking at the news and then I'm not talking about most of the news, and I'm just doing it off screen, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And if I'm looking at new games coming out on Steam and I overlook something but I'm not recording that doesn't make a lot of sense either. So yeah, I don't know really how to fix the issue here. It really should be two different shows. There should be a pre-show where we play Yu-Gi-Oh! And then there should be a post-show that's news, and there probably should even be a split between video game news and looking at the fall list cleanup and looking at the new games on Steam, as those are all separate different things. But I don't know how to break that up to make more sense. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.